Check one, check. Check one. Live check, 1 2 1 2. Kasoon, 11-14, checking now, okay. Checking new resolution, 1 2 1 2. Check. High resolution. Kasoon, zoom in. Camera, yeah. Focus. Hello, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Huh? No, I'm checking. After with lighting, it will be because light is off now. Checking now with lights on. Lights on. But like this dome is good. Lights are on. Checking now with lights on. Lights on. But like this dome is good. Lights are on. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ترندز البحوث والاستشارات. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ترندز البحوث والاستشارات. Yes. It's good. Through the stream, yeah.
Directly now, no buffering, no anything for the one.
No, this one will be. This is our main one. This is they will share on social media.
Air controlling. One monitor. Then restream through. You need to the old casting for the that side.
But this is the one they will.
This side for the incoming for the translation. I will record in this machine.
Okay.
For the full. We not to
But
switching anything.
this one they will put on social media the link for YouTube.
Yes. This is the original direct one.
Hello. Samir.
of politics and war and
Yeah.
so forth. Then we moved to Australia, and that's where I first learned English. I had a proper Aussie accent. And so that was really hard, actually,
Yeah.
because it was, I was 6 years old. I didn't speak the language at school. And again, at the time, you go and you just get immersed. And the school was wonderful and so forth. But it was, while we were there, we were constantly worried about our family. And, at the age of 6, I had the understanding that there's a war going on in Iraq. We're worried about my grandmother, Allah yarhamha. We're worried about our family. My parents were never fully happy because they always carried the burden of their family and the country and so forth. And you carry that even if you don't realize it. And then we moved to Saudi Arabia. And again, my father was posted there as a diplomat. My parents were so happy because we were, going to an Arab country, we're going to a Muslim majority country. And also they were planning that after Saudi Arabia, the posting, khalas, they wanted to move back to Iraq. But of course, fate had other plans for us. And so we were very aware. But the first time, I guess, I realized how much it was affecting us directly was when my father decided to defect from Saddam Hussein's regime as a consequence of the Kuwait invasion. So my father took a political and moral stance in my thinking how can we invade, a neighbor, an Arab country and so forth. And so then he left his position. We stayed in Saudi Arabia. Our lives changed dramatically in many, many, many ways. And I remember them telling me we're not going back to Iraq because the thinking was we were going to go back to Iraq, and the decision was made that we don't go back to Iraq. And that was when it really went, straight into my heart. And I was 10 years old. And it was, and then everything changed. So, the war, of course, in some ways we were lucky because, of course, we were in Saudi Arabia and the war was minimal compared to what our family was going through in Iraq when, of course, the war to liberate Kuwait in 1991 was horrific. But by then I was 10.5 years old. And I remember clearly, and I'm sure here in the UAE, people also remember that time, gas masks were given out, all of that fear. And always thinking that we have it easy compared to what was happening back in Iraq. And at the time, there was no way to communicate with family. So it was a very stressful period. So I was very aware. So it was every conversation, every breakfast conversation, lunch conversation, dinner conversation. So it was constant. The radio was always on, So I don't remember a time when we didn't discuss politics, actually.
I want to move a little forward to after you finished your educational years, it's time to make a decision. What do I want to study? Did you make the decision on point after high school? And you're like, yes, media is it, journalism is it? Or was it something that you talked out with your parents?
I considered becoming a lawyer.
Wow.
And part of it is because I really do believe in this thing of how do you defend people? How do you give a voice to people? And I do think sometimes journalism and law have this thing of...
They're interconnected in a way, yeah.
They are, right?
They are.
So I thought of law and I thought of journalism. And what I really wanted to do was, if I could be paid enough, was just sit down and write books and novels, right? I love books. And so I was like, yeah, you're not going to make a living just yet out of that. So I considered journalism. But the thing is, in the UK at the time, again, getting a journalism degree wasn't seen as very prestigious.
Okay.
So it was more prestigious to get an economics degree or a history degree, like an old school classical degree, and then you could become a journalist. And that's what I did. I studied history, and I love history. I have a fixation on dates, and I love history. And I really have this belief that to understand and write about what's happening today, you need to know what happened in the past. And so I wanted to study history, and I wanted to study modern history. So I basically studied history from the French Revolution till today.
Wow. So
what caused the French Revolution? And I went to University College London, and I love UCL in the UK.
We're done with Al-Haya. We're changing the chapter. We start with the Sharq al-Awsat. I think this is where you start to build a stronger core. You faced a lot of things, learned a lot of things, carry a lot of things with you. So tell me more about Sharq al-Awsat, Mina.
Sharq al-Awsat was a great chapter. So I started the Sharq al-Awsat in 2005. Took a 3-month break after Al-Hayat. One key advice I always give to people: if you leave a job before you start the new one, take a long break. Yeah. I started as the London correspondent. So I would, cover everything from Downing Street to the Foreign Office and so forth. And then I became the roving correspondent. So I was covering stories from Myanmar and Hong Kong. I wrote about the Rohingya Muslims there, before people were really acknowledging how terrible the situation was for them. through to Brussels and Romania, covering the NATO summit. After that, I became the bureau chief for Sharq al-Awsat in Washington. Youngest person to have done the job, first woman to have become the bureau chief. So it was really quite something. This was in 2009, and I stayed until the end of 2011. End of 2011, I went back to London to become the assistant editor-in-chief. So I was technically the third most senior person in Sharq al-Awsat. There was the editor-in-chief, the deputy, and then myself. And I moved back to London really to be with my parents. So I had thought I'd be longer in the US, and I really enjoyed covering from the US. I had been going to the US from the age of 23, and I had really, spent time getting to know the politics of it. And when I studied history, and even when I studied A-level politics, I studied the American system. I was fascinated by the American system. It's completely different today, frankly. It's incredible what's happening there. But for me, it was a really interesting place to know more about. So I was in the US 2009, 10, 11. At the end of 2011, my father was not well. Alhamdulillah, he is fine now. But at the time, he was unwell, and I was like, I want to be closer to my parents. And also because by 2011, of course, you had the Arab uprisings.
Yes.
At the time, my sister was living in Syria. So we had my sister in Syria. I was in Washington. My parents were in London. There was too much geographic distance between us. So I was like, one of us has to make the move. So I moved back. And I'm really glad I did. And the Sharq al-Awsat were wonderful. When I told them I wanted to come back, my boss at the time, the editor-in-chief was Tariq al-Hmayed, who was great to me. He was the one who hired me at Sharq al-Awsat. He said to me, just give me a couple of months because I have a plan for you. So wait. And I said, okay. And he was the one that pushed me to go to Washington. And I'm really lucky because I've had great mentors in journalism. And my 3 mentors all said, you have to take the job in Washington because Washington makes your career. And it's true. And so after that, I came back to London as the assistant editor-in-chief. Again, first woman, youngest person to do that position. And it was great, but it was very challenging because, leading a newsroom, especially when you had been somebody on equal level of your colleagues and you go as the bureau chief. So you've been away from the home base.
Yes.
And then you come back in a senior position. But alhamdulillah, I won them all over in a short period of time. And there were just a few people who were opposed to it. The vast majority were wonderful. Really great environment. Sharq al-Awsat had such a great environment, I have to say. Very diverse, real mix of men and women, people from all backgrounds in the Arab world. It was amazing. Like I got to know people from all over the Arab world. We all learned each other's accents. It was really wonderful, wonderful period. Very demanding. It was exhausting. So, if my parents here were like, wonderful period, we didn't see you. Which is true. It was very demanding. And then I was assistant editor-in-chief until 2015, but it was also a very difficult time.
Of course.
And, you take the stories home, seeing the destruction in so many Arab countries. Of course, we had several wars on Palestine, and at the height of the worst parts of the occupation. You also had, of course, then, Egypt went through turbulence. Syria descended, the uprising descended into civil war. Yemen, the Houthi takeover, which was terrible. And then, of course, civil war or war of some sort. Libya descended into civil war. Iraq then, of course, had Daesh come in. So by 2015, I felt completely burnt out.
Of course, and I think those were the years where I think social media and media in general had a huge role to play. I truly believe that media at that certain point was also shaping and reshaping identity, political identity was shifting, and everything was happening so quick in a split second. So I just want to ask you your thoughts on the emergence of, I think, social media at that time, the emergence of building this sense of trust between media agencies and the audience and the people. So what are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right in terms of the role of media and social media during those years, particularly. Twitter was really the main one. Now we often refer to social media. We're thinking TikTok, we're thinking Instagram, we're thinking video. At the time, Twitter was predominantly words and photos.
Yes.
And, we weren't where we are today in terms of AI manipulation, of photos being doctored. You'd have photos, from one place, people claiming it was another place.
Yeah.
But generally, you could trust what you saw on social media. Not everything, but if people were verified at the time, they were verified because Twitter had verified who this person was. Now you can pay and you get a blue tick. So at the time, Twitter was actually quite reliable. You couldn't, as a journalist, rely on it solely. You would have to do your own verification. But because Twitter would verify accounts, because manipulation was limited, and you could usually spot it. It would show quite quickly. It was such an important source of news, and I lived on Twitter, and we also engaged a lot. So I would tweet out a lot of things, and it was such an important source to get people back onto the stories you wrote. And I also met people through Twitter, and it was really the first time ever. It was through the uprisings and meeting people and getting to know characters and then meeting them in real life and having this online, offline relationship with sources that you cultivated. It was incredible. And it played in that part, as a journalist, it played a really important role. On the flip side, you also had the start of a lot of polarization. This was the start when people were creating their own narratives, and you only followed the people that you agreed with, then you would believe only what they said and not believe the other side. So I also think there was a really good, positive contribution, but it was also the start of a really negative, polarizing contribution to narratives and what people believed and not. And it was this fragmentation of where you got your information from that really then in the Arab world we felt, I think till today.
Of course.
It framed what people believed in, and there was a lot of poison that also then emanated through it. So I think for me, it was useful as a tool, and because I chose who I followed and I could verify and so forth. But I think as a wider general public, it was really a source of fragmentation, polarization, and a sense of, I can't trust you. I'll only trust the people who agree with me and all of this. So unfortunately, from there, I think we descended into a very dangerous space.
Of course, the National. You're leading, a woman leading one of the most I believe the most prestigious media agency here in country, outside of the country. I'm sure all that comes with so much responsibility, so much. And like we said, all this misinformation that's coming in and out, fake news. How does the National cope with all of this?
So you're right. The National is the most prestigious. And I genuinely feel not only lucky, but like you said, a huge responsibility.
Yes.
I feel like I'm the guardian of the National. And it's a huge responsibility from my company, IMI, that owns the National, that continues to trust me with it. Alhamdulillah, 8 years so far, leading it and really having an amazing newsroom. And what gives it that prestige, what gives it that significance is the people who work there and the journalism we do, the fact that everything is verified and we take that very, very seriously, and the accuracy, to your point, that disconnect from what you see, the noise that's out there. People come and they know to trust and rely on what the National does. And that's based on the people there. The second is kind of having the resources to have correspondents on the ground, to travel to the story, to go to it. And the third is really being based in Abu Dhabi and really being lucky to be in a country that is part of that global change that we're witnessing, be it in how people, are forming their identities, being global citizens. This is a country that I think represents the best of globalization. We've seen the worst of globalization, but the best of globalization, migration, positive migration, what that can mean, having a place where people want to migrate to create opportunity, tackling the issues of technology, both in the good and the bad, and realizing that, and how do you process that, the energy transition, all of that, all of these stories actually come through the UAE globally. And so to be at a news outlet that is covering all these stories and actually being in a place where the stories come through here. So it's a real advantage for us, but it's also a huge responsibility because we want to tell that story and to know the reverberations outside of it. So we think about that all the time. And I think as the media landscape changes, as information gets more and more fragmented, I think you'll see a cycle of people going back and saying, I want to know who the source is. I want to know that I can trust you. Because the more we get AI, non-verifiable stuff, people just getting things on their WhatsApp, with time, people are getting tired that they want to be properly informed. And I think that's why I have a true belief in journalism. And I think, people say everyone's a journalist now because they have social media account. And I said, no, everyone's a publisher now. Anyone can publish. Anyone can get online, publish something online. But not everybody is a journalist. And I think that's the value of really what the National stands for.
With all these technological changes, and personally, I don't remember the last time I came to work, it did not use ChatGPT, did not use all these AI tools that are being published or launched every single day. How does the National overcome all these technological updates that are happening? How does it include it in their everyday work?
It's incredible. I mean, like you said, the tools you now have, I could have dreamt of 25 years ago. I'd go interview somebody, and to transcribe the interview would take me 6 hours to go back, check them.
Yeah.
And now I plug it in and it's transcribed in 2 minutes. And yes, I'll go back and check it. 'Cause, machines
course.
make mistakes just like humans. I'll go check it. But the time, the efficiencies are incredible compared to now. Same thing with photos. Before you take a photo, your photographer would have to go get the film developed, see how and now, of course, it's instant. You see what images you have, what video you have. So I think that's great. And I think that's the technological advancements that we're so lucky to be living in that age, because we can do so much more. We can tell stories in so many different ways. But then there's the point, as you said, of there are challenges to news outlets because big tech, first of all, is getting most of the money through advertising. So there's a real commercial challenge. But there's also the challenge of IP. And, I don't control how people use whatever the national publishes online. And that's a real challenge because intellectual property is important, and sourcing and, is this primary sourcing, secondary sourcing, all these things are really important. And we're part of that global conversation. Nobody's figured it out yet, but everybody is having to work on it. So for us, I think it's really exciting. The technological innovations, having AI, help you, really think about how people are going to be informed in the future, but also understanding that the human element is really important. News gathering, you still need somebody to go and actually see it, and I think that will always stay the case. Now, there's people who say, well, I can get AI to write an op-ed in the voice of Mina al-Arabi. So I can put it and say, get Mina al-Arabi style and do it. And yeah, probably they could, but it's still not me writing.
Sure.
And you have no way, the unpredictability of actually what would be my view on X, Y, or Z. So I think that's important. My constant thought is about how do I make sure we are giving readers, users, listeners, viewers what they actually want, but also what they need. Because sometimes you can say, what I want is just entertainment.
True.
But it's like, but you also have to be informed. How do I make sure that I'm informing you in a way that you find useful, that you actually need this? So it can't always be, we are informed by the numbers, we're informed by trends, but we're not guided by, they don't direct us, right? So, and I think making that distinction is really important. And we try to do that at the National, that there is mission-driven stories that we will care about and that we'll make sure go out there. And it's our job to go to the audience first. And I always tell people we are audience first now. Before they'd say digital first for newspapers becoming digital first rather than print, I say that era, we've gone beyond that. Now it's audience first. So I have to think of my audience first, and how do I make sure that I get them this information and this news or feature or interview?
I always think of, sometimes people tend to forget the job of the editor-in-chief. Sometimes people be like, oh, wow, that person's just the editor-in-chief. They have the simplest life. But no, it's actually the most responsible thing that you could ever do, because you're the voice, you're the mirror, you're everything. You have to think of including all segments of society. Like you said, make sure everything is going as it should go. But a question I want to ask you is, can you just describe a simple day of what Mina al-Arabi does at the National?
There is no day that is the same as the previous or the next day. There really is no simple day. I'll tell you, my biggest responsibility and my most challenging time is when we have colleagues who are in danger zones.
Yeah.
And they're dangerous for different reasons. So I remember when the earthquake happened in Turkey in 2023, we sent colleagues there and we were worried about aftershocks. And they, I had colleagues sleep in their car outside, and we were, just making sure they're okay and they're safe. Of course, during the wars, we have colleagues in Gaza, we have colleagues in Jerusalem, and he goes sometimes to the West Bank and otherwise. And so thinking about that and the responsibility of saying, when do I insist they have to leave? But they're also journalists, they're there for that. And I think that's the case for every editor-in-chief. I don't think I'm special. For every editor-in-chief, that decision of when do we pull out, when do we stay is the most difficult. So really, truly, no one day is the same.
Wow. Just wow. I'm sure that 10 years ago, media wasn't the same as today. And you're here in the UAE. Where do you see media going here in the UAE, outside of the UAE, 10 years from today, or even 5 years from today?
Change is inevitable because of all the technological changes. But I think where media is going is that people will continue to look for trusted sources of information. And we see at peak emergency times, if there's, be it a health issue like we saw with COVID, be it, God forbid, war issue where people are like, what's happening on this issue, you see that it peaks, that people go to the sources they trust. So I think that that development will continue. Audio and video becoming more and more important because people want to listen or watch their screen. And text is struggling. And I think that's an educational issue. It goes beyond just media. That's like, in general, how society is being educated and informed. It's a big challenge, and we see that, really, really rising. I think another trend in 5-10 years, we'll see that original voices, the identity of who is the journalist, the presenter, and so forth, becomes more and more important, and how that brand is built. But I still have great faith that media will stay hugely important. It will find new ways to raise money that is beyond the traditional commercial gambit that we have now, and how the monetization side will develop will really affect what happens in that landscape. So those are kind of like my focus areas and where I think we're going. I think newsletters are a way that text will survive, because the newsletters will go back to that curation, that personalization. So the more curation, personalization, direct to audience, that audience first that we go, at least in the next 5 years, that's the trend I see. 10 years, it's a bit more difficult to project.
Mina offline. So when you're online, editor-in-chief, the national media, news coming in, news going out, op-ed pieces and all that. What do you do in your free time? I know you read books, but I also know and realize that you play board games, dominoes and stuff like that.
Yes.
So it's true. Do you play it for the strategy of the game, for the critical thinking, the exercise, or do you just play it for fun?
I love games. I'm like a total child. I love games. I play dominoes with my father, who's brilliant, who always outwits me. And I play it with my cousins too. I love board. I like having fun. So, very nerdy board games to have fun. So I love spending time outdoors when the weather is nice. So even though I'm a city girl very much, I love spending time outdoors and in greenery, and where possible, go to beautiful locations. So I spend time outdoors. I love walking. The time that I can spend walking is my favorite time, open landscapes. I love museums. I love discovering new cities. I have this thing that I try to go to a new country every year. So when I can, I'll make time. So being out and about, spending time with friends, reading as much as possible, and walking, being in nature when I can.
Now, what kind of advice would you give youngsters that are just about to begin their career in journalism?
Also, 3 pieces of advice. The first, general knowledge is really important. I know people think now you can Google everything and you can go to ChatGPT. General knowledge is really important because it allows you to have a gut instinct. Like, does this look right or wrong? Is based on a lot of general knowledge that you've accumulated over time. So accumulate that knowledge. Don't rely on just go online and so forth. General knowledge is really important. And for that, read a newspaper. Second piece of advice, really read a newspaper. Get into the habit of reading newspaper from cover to cover.
Yeah.
Because even if you're not interested in a particular section, you will pick up a piece of information that you didn't know. And so as a journalist, you have to have general knowledge. And then the third is get a specialty. So have the general knowledge, read one newspaper every day, almost religiously, but seriously and uniform. And then the third is have a specialty, be known for something. Not from day one. As a young journalist, you're not going to be known for something, but know what it is that you're interested in and really develop that specialty in terms of sources, in terms of education, books, and so forth. Because with time, you'll be surprised suddenly, wow, I'm known that I know about this thing. And that is related really also to sources. And if you allow me a fourth piece of advice,
of course.
Trust is really important. If people trust you, that if they tell you something and they say this is off the record and you hold that true, they will trust you with information. You break that once, you can never regain their trust. trust is really important, that your reader or your viewer knows that when you tell them something, it is true and they can hold you to account. And when you can't say, you have to say, I'm unable
Yes.
to disclose, I don't know, we haven't been informed yet. So trust and the relationship you have with audiences, with sources, with your colleagues is the number one thing. You have to earn it. And once you earn it, really take care of it.
What's your book recommendation? One book.
No, I can't do one book. There are too many books.
Because I just started, I think, my reading era.
Yeah.
And I just read a book and now I want to move to another book. So advice.
There's so many books. Okay, Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles is one of my favorites. Haji Murad by Leo Tolstoy is brilliant. There are so many books. All of Fitzgerald's books, you should read them. Ernest Hemingway is amazing, so read him. I would say I absolutely cannot give you one book to read, but read. Read books. And read fiction as much as you read nonfiction, because it will give you joy, but also spark your imagination and help your language remain strong. Because language and the art of speaking and writing is a constant muscle that we have to continue to work on.
Thank you. I honestly enjoyed today's conversation. Good luck. You are a true inspiration. Keep it up. Stay a star that you are.
That's very kind. Thank you for this amazing conversation. I spoke about things I've never spoken about publicly. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Welcome to another episode of Trending Echoes. My name is Eliazi El-Hosseini, and we have a great guest with us today, Dr. Samir Saran, the president of ORF, the Observer Research Foundation.
Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is ours. PhDs. I know that you took your bachelor's degree in engineering, and then you moved to your master's degree in media, and then your PhDs in sustainability. So you're a man that knows it all.
No, I think I'm a man who kept escaping all the difficult subjects he encountered previously. So engineering was difficult, let's move to media. Media was complicated, let's move to sustainability. If I had to do the next degree, it won't be sustainability.
What will it be?
I'm seriously considering, every decade of my life, and I was just thinking about this, I have been back to college.
Okay.
And I think those years have been the most wonderful years of that decade. I have met the next gen. When I was in my 40s, I walked and I ate and I partied with a generation that was in their 20s, and I could see, oh my God, they are so much smarter, they are so much brighter, they have so much more understanding of the times we are in, and that motivated me to continue to engage with them, learn from them, be with them. My journeys have been shaped by these 2 or 3 years I've spent in universities every decade of my life. 40s, I did my PhD. 30s, I did my master's. 20s, of course, I was doing my engineering. And the 0 to 18 is when your parents go to school. You don't, right?
Yeah.
We are just having fun. They are the ones who are busy with your homeworks and your grades and your college admissions thereafter. So I do want to go back. And I was just thinking that what could the next subject be? Because while I have focused on energy and engineering and sustainability and climate in my degrees, technology has really driven me. And I really want to think about going back to college and doing something that would be at the intersection of identity and technology, not human identity, but the technology that is going to be intelligent and will now have an identity of its own. And the conversations humans will have with the intelligent beings that they actually have seeded is going to be the most important identity debate of the future. How we treat our machines will decide how they treat us. And in that sense, that identity debate has to start now. Our conversations with our intelligent assistants and then intelligent mentors at some point, they will be guiding us at some point. And we need to have that debate.
But do you think this technological identity that you just said is reshaping human identity today?
Totally. I have many identities, right?
Yeah.
You have many
Yes,
identities. And our digital identities, I always, in fact, I wrote a book recently called Geotechnography, which is actually superimposing the reality of our physical existence with the reality of our cloud existence, our digital existence, right? And I always tell people that who we are essentially was the stories that were told to us when we were children.
True.
Right? I read about my epics, my religious books, my neighborhood stories, the stories of bravery, courage, valor, treachery, cowardice, etc. Right? And they imbibed in me, they coded in me, they programmed me in a manner that helped me decide what is right or wrong, what is the
Yeah.
good decisions to make, what is the right thing to do for your people, for your family, for your country, for your communities, right? So we were programmed by the stories that were told to us,
Yeah.
right? In some sense. So our identities were shaped by the neighborhoods we grew in when I was growing up. Today, my stories are Insta stories. They're stories of TikTok and Reel. And they're
True.
stories of faraway places, of faraway revolutions, of faraway protests, of faraway celebrations, of faraway wars and conflicts and bravery and betrayal, right? I am very different online to what I am today. I was just wondering if you were growing up in India or Abu Dhabi or any other global city where you're connected all the time, your local stories have no chance to compete.
True.
People are being dislocated through the mediation that is shaping their understanding of the world. So, in some ways, there are John B. Thompson, if I remember correctly, wrote this book, Media and Modernity in the Last Century. He was talking about broadcast media. But he argued that we all have mediated histories. We don't live through histories anymore. Our histories are all mediated. In India, you would find people resonating with anti-nuclear protest in Germany rather than what was happening in their own neighborhood or in Sri Lanka or in Bangladesh or in Afghanistan. They would have greater resonance for the plight of certain situations in distant geographies because it's available on Instagram, it is bombarded into their daily lives through different mediums than with their own neighborhoods who are not necessarily connected in the same way. So we are changing. Our identities have been transformed by digital, and many of our responses today are no longer authentic and organic. They are mediated.
I think,
We
okay.
have the death of authenticity. That is what I say. What has really happened with the digital is that authenticity is died.
Okay, so talking about media and anything, do you think, because you're heading a media, a think tank today, do you think think tanks' strategies and policy making when writing research is influenced by media today or influenced by the societies and their opinion and all these narratives on social media, or do you think they're strictly on research and global trends?
No. Look, we are in a symbiotic ecosystem. There is no way you can escape the pulls and pressures and the attraction of the digital. Which young scholar would not want his big idea to be celebrated by millions around the world?
True.
There is no way that they are not going to try to put it out there. And they should. There is no way that they're not going to try to simplify it and make it more relatable and make it more digestible and for the Americans maybe on a bumper sticker, the big idea on a bumper sticker, that's the American dream, right? Everyone is going to try to promote their own thoughts and original innovations through the media offerings that are available. And people do that. Think tanks do that. And it's not wrong. My only quibble, and therefore one of our principal positions as a think tank, as Observer Research Foundation, and I know of some others who agree, is that even as we use the medium to reach out to many and to simplify our messages and to make it more relatable, we must defend pure research as well. So for me, actually, making research more appealing, more attractive, in some sense, making public policy sexy has to be a mission of research institutions that are working in the more dense field of policy and research. Right now, here is the take. I believe because the long form can now be created into nugget-sized, communicable products, people have now an incentive to defend that research. So I see more pure researchers enabled by the media environment, because boring research can be made far more exciting through folks like you who can transform the messaging and the innovation. I think research is going to be lifted up, and it's not going to be harmed negatively. I think research today is a far more communicable sector, and therefore a far more relatable sector, a far more street sector, and no longer the elite sector that it used to be.
I had a conversation with a couple of people a while ago, and when I was sitting on a table, and I'm like, I work at a think tank, and they're like, run. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, the concept of think tanks is dying. And
Good
I'm
idea.
like, why do you think so? They're like, because there's two ways to say it. There's researchers that are truthful, and there are researchers that just say the truth. And the difference between being truthful and saying the truth is that when you say the truth, you say your version of the truth.
Yeah, that's your opinion.
Yes, but when you're being truthful, you're saying the truth all the time, despite the situation. So, what are your ideas on that?
Look, I think all of us have to be truth-filled and truthful.
Okay.
And if we are really truthful, we will also reflect and admit that this is a point of view and not the entire landscape. So I think truthfulness is important to have truthfulness. So in some sense, you have to be honest to admit that this is your position, and there are other perspectives, and perhaps the median is somewhere in between, and we need to discover that through conversations. So I think both are complementary and not necessarily contradictory. So for me, truthful allows you to be truth-filled, and truth-filled allows your personal opinions to move over time. I have changed my position so many times. You know, there's a famous saying, when the facts change, your positions must change. So as you become more aware of issues, of developments, of realities that you were unaware of, reflective people generally tend to change their mind. And changing the mind is not bad. For example, Francis Fukuyama, end of history, right? We have all become this, we have all now entered Pax Americana. Everyone is now market-based and liberal and living the American dream all over the world. We don't have any differences, a homogenized world. To his latest book, which is called Identity, which is basically the end of history, where he's basically changed his mind. So in some sense, all of us evolve over time as we encounter new realities. So I think both are two sides of the same coin. Being truthful is a good virtue, but without being truth-filled, it is only sound bites and not necessarily progress that we seek as a think tank. Now, why are think tanks dying? That's the big question. Think tanks, as we know them, perhaps may be declining, maybe becoming less relevant. But think tanks of the future will continue to ensure that this craft, this trade, is dynamic and is actually an essential part of any public sphere. Now, let me tell you why are they declining and dying. For example, if we are honest about it, you had tons of folks or literature who writing, long form articles on climate action. You had the Brookings, and you had take the top 10 American institutions, all writing pro or against, for or against, arguing for energy transitions, arguing for government action, arguing for whatever. Millions of dollars were given to them by various funders, by hundreds of funders were giving them millions of dollars to move the needle to one little kid in Europe. And by the way, I don't agree with her at all. I disagree with her completely. But she had more influence than all the Brookings of the world put together, Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg and her climate action on the street with a bunch of folks had more influence, grabbed more headlines, moved more needles, and provoked more responses, both positive and negative, than all of us put together in the think tank world on climate action. I'm talking about one specific field. What does it tell you? It doesn't tell you that think tanks have died. It just tells you that think tanks should have been including Greta Thunberg as part of their stakeholder group, as part of the communities that they need to work through, as part of the new influencers who are going to shape the future. So think tanks where stiff, tie-wearing, middle-aged men could smoke cigars and have conversations and believe that would solve the problem in the world are dead. Think tanks today have to be nimble, agile, out there amongst the people, and yet have that ability to produce facts through deep research and enlighten the communities they are proliferating, right? So think tanks of the new world will have elements, will have a visage of a media entity,
Yeah.
will have the core of a research institution, and will have the leadership of a startup. You have to be hungry, you have to be relentless.
Have this very diverse educational career. How do you think that reflects on how you build the strategies and policies, but also the objectives of ORF, and how you build messaging on your platforms and how you transform research?
Check mic, 1 2. Check, check, check. Mic checking, mic testing. Testing audio, 1 2 3. 1 2 3. Check, check, check.
In a way that better serves the audience today.
Here I think it might be useful to understand how we have organized research at ORF.
Okay.
ORF is a researcher-led institution. So we are not a top-down research institution. So we don't sit there and tell people what they need to do. My colleagues actually propose what they want to do over the next year and over the longer term, right? So what we do is we actually curate that into from all the various strands of proposals that we get across the 200 odd people who do research at ORF. Our essential task is to make sure that we are able to curate cohorts who are working on similar themes, and sometimes even seed partnerships and collaborations, and sometimes perhaps tweak their directions a little so that they are complementary and not competing, or many a times also arrange research in across a period of time so that we are able to respond to one particular theme of importance through a whole project, right? So our job is not necessarily to seed the ideas into what people should be doing, but to actually seed the symphony that allows all of their ideas to be presented to the world as a concert. Now, the challenge here is that we are also a big tent think tank, very few left in the world, which means we are not left, we are not right, we don't believe in isms, we are no ideologies, only ideas, no politics, only policies. For us, we are a big tent organization. So we will have folks who are from the AFD, and we'll have folks from the Linke party in Germany. In one of our rooms, similarly from India, and similarly from other parts of the world. So we don't have political and economic biases. Our bias is to good ideas, and we want to discover those. And sometimes the most important ideas that will excite the global right would be born in the global left, and vice versa. So I think the idea here is our motive at ORF is to allow the researchers to propose creatively their view of the world, because that is the reason why they are there. We want the creative power of so many minds thinking about how to visualize certain challenges and certain opportunities, and our job is to basically strengthen how they get there and how they produce those and how they materialize many of the direction they want to chase to. So because I have straddled the world of business and policy, and because I've been in engineering, and I've done media studies, and I've actually also been part of corporate communications for a very large company, and of course then in academics and research, I have learned the hard way that solutions are multi-domain by design, and sometimes when you focus only on one, you are missing the larger picture. And therefore, for me, food security is as much about maritime security as it is about climate change and water security. So food security
Yeah.
in its holistic sense has elements of geopolitics and connectivity
Yeah.
and changing climate and therefore resilient agriculture practices and of course skilling and upskilling and technology and market access to
Yeah.
the millions of producers. So food security, a very simple food
Yeah.
is a multi-domain solution. Everything is, right? Uh, we are excellent at, humans are excellent, and that's why this species has done better than any others on this planet on creating complex systems. We are today struggling in managing those, but
Yeah.
we have built complex systems which kind of mirror the complex system the human body is, and in some sense global governance was meant to be actually helping us in managing these complex systems. Unfortunately, in this decade, we are high on global politics, we are low on global governance. And I think that is what we need to rectify, and think tanks have a role to play there.
I know you're the founder of Rhizina, which is a dialogue that happens each year. And last year you talked about peace, which is something I think is very important. It is a topic that people should continuously talk about. This year I saw the premiere video of Rhizina, and in your premiere video, I know you being you, that every visual that was used in the video had a message behind it, and used three words: conversation, community.
Ideas?
Yes, ideas, conversation, community, and that we should invest in three. Can you tell us more about the dialogue this year?
So that is a save the date video.
Yeah.
And it is not necessarily a thematic video.
Okay.
Wait for that. That is my big passion project. I do that every year. I spend, I think, weeks designing the script, working with the creative folks who make sense out of the scripts that our small team puts together. It's going to come out soon. But here it is. Let me just tell you about next year. Today, diplomacy and dialogue is being conducted on the battlefields. The world has become trigger happy. Everyone is happy entering into conflicts and perhaps even wars now. Dialogue has disappeared. Conversations are no longer fashionable, right? And I genuinely believe that this trigger happiness that the world is experiencing is very dangerous. We worked very hard in the last century to make conflict and contest and violent conflict the last resort that states would turn to. Today's states see this as the first thing that they need to do. They first shoot and then they say, let's talk. We need to change. We need to reorder the way we conduct diplomacy. So of course, conversations are important, right? And conversations, difficult ones, are important. And conversations not with those you agree with, but those you disagree with. Otherwise, there is no point of a conversation, right? Otherwise, it's a cheering squad. So my point here is, conversations with those you disagree with are essential. Today, we have to celebrate the difference and not see it as a public bad. Differences are good. We again have evolved as species because we disagreed. There, no perfect storm could destroy us all because we had chosen different means and methods of existence. That's why we survived. We have to agree that by design we are meant to disagree. By design we are not meant to agree. Disagreement was good for evolution, and we must celebrate disagreement. So ideas are of course the bedrock of any progress, and I think today we are seeing ideas compete rather than ideas enter into a compact of progress. Today we see ideas of negativity rather than progress, conversations which are amongst the like-minded rather than those with you disagree with, and of course communities are more important now than ever. We have actually come back a full circle. We went to the atomization of society. The individual human cosmopolitan cities, New York, in its heydays. We have all, the pandemic told us. When the pandemic hit us, we realized that end of the day, we relied on our communities and our societies. Communities were the cavalry, and I said it then, that there was no government armies coming to save us. There was no, superpower or great power or big power. They were all selfish powers. They were all saving themselves. Eventually, we all had to fend for our own, and we all had to look at our neighborhoods and our local governments and our immediate communities to cater to us. Where was the so-called superpower? They would rather throw the vaccine into the dustbin than give it to a country in Asia or Africa. They had excess vaccine supplies and none coming to the poorer part of the world. I mean, a developing country like India was sending vaccines to 125 countries because we believed in that sense of community and the sense of sharing and the sense of solidarity, right? So my point here is, in a world which is as broken as we are today, and I'm sorry to rain on anyone's parade who's celebrating 2025 as a year of celebration, and I know some people are, but it's not. It is the manifestation of what is wrong with us, not what is right with us. Everything, and I'm talking about every country and everywhere. We are in a broken world where we see other progress to build a new, far more at peace with the planet, and far more responsive to individual requirements. So we can do all three for the first time: serve communities, serve the individual, and serve the country. And yet we are right now going back to the old debates of the 19th century.
With all this accessibility to social media, this communication, making it a borderless platform for people to talk, it's building pores. And with these pores, radical groups are coming in and destabilizing many countries. And India, for example, is also a country that is facing radical groups within the country itself. I have two questions. Where does India stand when it comes to these radical groups, and how does it affect its partnerships with neighboring countries? And what is the role of think tanks like ORF when it comes to making a more resilient, making narratives more resilient on platforms to ban these radical groups and bridge these gaps?
That's a very long question. And I think that should be a podcast by itself. And I promise to come and do that with you. So invite me when this is an important question to have. It's not easy. The simple answer. The internet is such a democratic medium that every deviant idea has many takers. No one is alone on the internet. In a classroom, that classroom bully is alone. You can ostracize him. The teacher can catch him, can send him out of the classroom, and punish him, speak to his parents, rectify him. A classroom bully on the internet, which has 1 billion classrooms, is a community of 1 billion people.
True.
So suddenly, no one is alone in this world. So everything has been normalized by our digital society. Everything. Every deviant behavior, radical behavior will have many takers, right? So we are seeing the normalization of deviance at a pace and at a scale that is going to challenge governments, law enforcement agencies, and more broadly communities and societies. It is not an easy situation in terms of dealing with what is radical and what is clearly unacceptable behavior in society, right? That's one part. The second, the internet was not designed for your culture and mine. It was designed for California culture, where absolute free speech is seen as a divine endowment. That you can abuse each other and there's a right to offend and there is a right to be a complete unacceptable citizen of this world, and yet you're allowed that. That's very good, and that's their culture. It doesn't work in multicultural societies with storied histories like ours, right? We are a country which has not just religious sensitivities. We have linguistic sensitivities and specificities. We have cultural histories that are both complementary and of course very distinct. Cuisines and costumes and of course the whole conversations around distinct geographical communities, right? So we have regions, we have religions, we have, of course, all other forms of specificities. And for us, keeping the society stable and continuing that whole idea of India as a unit must be the single largest, single biggest project. And this is true for India, this is true for every country. The social fabric has to be zealously protected. So it has to be national economic priority, national political priority, national security priority. Defending the idea of one country, whether it's India, whether it's UAE, whether it's the US, whether it's any other part. We're not special. I'm just saying it's true for every country. But in our countries, we were taught that you don't say certain things in public. From a young age, we were told, you don't say this. This is not the right thing to say. This is not the right way to behave. This is not the right thing to do. We were told, because we were so different and we live with so many people and so many millions of different people in the same small place, we came up with some rules of engagement, some decent protocols that allowed us to coexist. The digital does not see that because it was designed in California.
Check, check. Mic check. Live checking. 1, 2. Check, check, check. Check, check. 1, 2. Check, check.
Which has no regard for the cultures we live in. In our countries, we are suffering from the right to offend phenomena infiltrating our discourse. We did not have the right to offend. In fact, we had the responsibility to be decent. In America, they have the right to offend. In our country, we had the responsibility to be decent. Only then you maintain that fabric, right? So we are caught in these two different phenomena. The digital is Californian laws. The real is based on traditions over 5,000, 7,000, 8,000 years. And how do you reconcile the two? Governments are struggling with this reality that how do you make American tech or China tech compliant with Indian reality, Emirati reality, Saudi reality, etc., etc., etc. Now, what do we do when we get to this position? Governments do what they do best, which is take a big hammer and smash anything. So bans.
Yes.
Because they don't have the sophisticated regulations, they don't have the technological capacities all the time to intervene. So what they do is they shut the door. To keep ourselves safe, let's shut the door. That's what happens. When you're threatened in your house, you shut the door. Maybe if you had gone out, you would be safer. But you normally close the door and keep inside. Maybe if you had gone out and raised an alarm and told 10 people about it, you would have managed the threat. But you normally close the door and sit inside where you're alone, isolated, and now what wants to get you can get you. Right? So my point here is, I am not in favor of bans, but I do understand that in the absence of certain regulatory instruments, you have to. So in India, we have seen the banning of certain platforms, for example, Chinese TikTok platforms, because they believe it was an imperative on national security. They did that. They have banned certain gambling applications. They have banned certain other fly-by-night operators who were creating apps and basically were harming the younger populations, the lower age groups, misguiding them, misleading them. So they have done things. But in the end, I think we have to consider 2 or 3 radical ideas to deal with the threat that we face, which is really radical. It's not that radicalism is new. Radicalism is now on steroids, digital steroids. It's not that we didn't have terrorists before or extremists before or crazy people before. We do. But now they are fueled and catalyzed and aggregated and mobilized through technologies. So we have to think of a few things. One, I think before any platform, AI or non-AI or quantum or any future technology, before future technologies become commercially accessible to everyone, we have to go to what I call the vaccine principle. That first they have to be tested in a small lab, then they have to be tested on a city scale project, and then they have to be tested on a larger human settlement. Only after we are able to study the collateral implications of their entering our lives should we be giving them the permission to be available to everyone. Today, all big tech companies of the world have used us as the testing lab. And they have made a virtue out of it. Microsoft upgrade, antivirus upgrade. This is the new patch to fix the system. We are their lab. They should be paying us money for testing their product that they're earning billions of dollars on. Would you ever allow a pharmaceutical drug to tell you this? That this is your medicine, now this is your upgrade for your medicine. You would shut the company.
Check mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Mic check. 1, 2, 1 2 1 2. Check mic. Check check. Check check.
it down. Because it kills a human. Technology will kill a society if you're not careful. So we have to come up with a certain sandbox arrangement where we have graded testing of the product before we allow it into human. And by the way, Singapore and by the way, UAE as well.
Yes.
So Singapore and UAE are countries, and there are some others as well. And India is considering that as well on financial technology. Sorry, I sometimes speak too fast. But India is considering that as well. So I think one is we have to come up with a radical test and verify process before technologies should be introduced into society. Then they should be tested in the communities that they want to be in. There's no point doing a test in California and creating it for the Indian market. It should be tested here. So that's the first part. The second, I think there's a very interesting episode that has shaped my life. There was a political leader in Europe, and I will not name the person, who was asked by media folks, do politicians understand technology? And I liked her reply. She said, maybe politicians don't understand technology, but do engineers understand politics? Do technologists understand politics? And I think that is equally important. I think social sciences now has to be embedded in all the coders who are being trained today. They should understand what are the implications of what they are doing. Technology is no longer about getting efficiency and economic output. It is also about serving society and protecting what we really care for and stand for. I think those who produce our technologies are very young, because that is it's a young man and woman's sport. But more important, they are not necessarily exposed to the consequences of what they are doing. I think we need far greater dose of social sciences in our innovation frameworks, in our innovation policies. In fact, all funding institutions, government and non-government, should insist that founders have to go through a certain curriculum before they produce technologies that have implication on society at scale. I think that's the second idea, that let's rethink how we train those who create technologies, and how do we support those who create technologies. But finally, it is not going to be handled by any single country or any single entity. We need global partnerships like never before. And that is what is failing our people at this time. We don't have global partnerships. Technology has become a zero sum. And between the US versus China, and Europe versus America, and West Coast versus East Coast, we are having many of these conflicts that prevents a principle-based normative framework that will in many ways come up with the 3 or 4 big laws that define innovation for the future. No, I'm a science fiction buff as a child. I used to read Isaac Asimov. I've read each book of his, and many others. But I remember Isaac Asimov had the 3 laws of robotics. Very simple. That the robot will not harm a human. Very simple law. So now there's nothing that you can do. Every program that builds an intelligent being has to be designed in a manner that they cannot harm a human. That a robot will harm itself before a harm falls on another human due to a certain. They had some 3 laws of robotics. We have to come to some we don't have to come up with legislations. All our political class loves writing long legislation. They have to come up with some 3 or 4 very simple principles that allow a reconciliation. But how does technology harm our relationship with our neighbors? Technology today can create wars. It can create unrest. It can create disturbances. It can harm international relations. It can send the wrong perception of a country to its friendly neighboring country. So these are challenges, right? But we are lucky. For example, India. If you look at India's neighborhood, we have land neighbors and we have maritime neighbors. Maritime neighbors would mean Singapore and Indonesia, would mean UAE and Saudi Arabia and some, and the Gulf countries. Land neighbors would mean Pakistan and Bangladesh. And of course China, right? We have these 3 big land neighbors and a much larger group of maritime neighbors. Some of our best relationships are with countries having distinctly different religious and cultural traditions. For example, I can without any hesitation say that the India-UAE partnership is the hottest stock on the global stock exchange. I think the last 10 years, the transformation you have seen in the political content, in the economic and business relationship, in the relationship between our cities and our peoples is huge. Yesterday, I was going back to my hotel and we were celebrating the opening of IIM Ahmedabad Dubai campus. The previous month, you had IIT Delhi in Abu Dhabi. You have ORF Middle East in the World Trade Center. So, in some sense, our leaders are wise. Uh, Radicalism and radical groups and radical action can harm everything. Let's not be foolish and naive about it. International relations can be harmed, brotherly relationships can be harmed, friendly relationships can be harmed. We need wise leadership who looks above all this. So I think we know, for example, in the instance of UAE or India or Saudi Arabia or India, they know that yes, we may have our largest population might be Hindu, your largest population might be Muslim, but look, we are serving our people and our region.
Yeah.
And religion is a pursuit that must be encouraged and nourished. And we do that. We celebrate our festivals. We celebrate our temples. We are not saying that you can't do this. We like to celebrate all forms of religion. And by the way, in both UAE and in India, right? We celebrate all our festivals together as communities. There's celebration of being a community, and yet national responsibilities of economic growth, of infrastructure, of progress for our people is what drives national policies, international relations. Our best friends come from very diverse backgrounds. And I've just named a few of them: Indonesia, Singapore, UAE, Saudi Arabia. You will not find a common pattern linking them up. You don't choose your neighbors. You celebrate with them.
But what do you think is the biggest misconception about the UAE India relationship that you hope people would understand more? Because I know that I cannot see the UAE without India. They coexist hand in hand. And like we had a conversation earlier that we have many similar traits, many similar cultural morals and values.
But misconception in India or in UAE or globally? The internet was not designed for your culture and mine. It was designed for California culture, where absolute free speech is seen as a divine endowment. That you can abuse each other and there's a right to offend and there's a right to be a complete, unacceptable citizen of this world. And yet you're allowed that. That's very good. And that's their culture. It doesn't work in multicultural societies with storied histories like ours. Right? We are a country which has not just religious sensitivities. We have linguistic sensitivities and specificities. We have cultural histories that are both complementary and of course very distinct. Cuisines and costumes and of course the whole conversations around distinct geographical communities, right? So we have regions, we have religions, we have, of course, all other forms of specificities. And for us, keeping the society stable and continuing that whole idea of India as a unit must be the single biggest project. And this is true for India, this is true for every country. The social fabric has to be zealously protected. So it has to be national economic priority, national political priority, national security priority. Defending the idea of one country, whether it's India, whether it's UAE, whether it's the US, whether it's any other part. We're not special, I'm just saying it's true for every country. But in our countries, we were taught that you don't say certain things in public. From a young age, we were told, you don't say this. This is not the right thing to say. This is not the right way to behave. This is not the right thing to do. We were told, because we were so different and we lived with so many people and so many millions of different people in the same small place, we came up with some rules of engagement, some decent protocols that allowed us to coexist. The digital does not see that because it was designed in California, which has no regard for the cultures we live in. In our countries, we are suffering from the right to offend phenomena infiltrating our discourse. We did not have the right to offend. In fact, we had the responsibility to be decent. In America, they have the right to offend. In our country, we had the responsibility to be decent. Only then you maintain that fabric, right? So we are caught in these two different phenomena. The digital is Californian laws. The real is based on traditions over 5,000, 7,000, 8,000 years. And how do you reconcile the two? Governments are struggling with this reality that how do you make American tech or China tech compliant with Indian reality, Emirati reality, Saudi reality, etc., etc., etc. Now, what do we do when we get to this position? Governments do what they do best, which is take a big hammer and smash anything. So bans.
Yes.
Because they don't have the sophisticated regulations, they don't have the technological capacities all the time to intervene. So what they do is they shut the door. To keep ourselves safe, let's shut the door. No, that's what happens. When you're threatened in your house, you shut the door. Maybe if you had gone out, you would be safer.
Yeah.
But you normally close the door and keep inside. Maybe if you had gone out and raised an alarm and told 10 people about it, you would have managed the threat. But you normally close the door and sit inside where you're alone, isolated, and now what wants to get you can get you. Right? So my point here is, I am not in favor of bans, but I do understand that in the absence of certain regulatory instruments, you have to. So in India, we have seen the banning of certain platforms. For example, Chinese TikTok platforms, because they believe it was an imperative on national security. They did that. They have banned certain gambling applications. They have banned certain other fly-by-night operators who were creating apps and basically were harming the younger populations, the lower age groups, misguiding them, misleading them. So they have done things. But in the end, I think we have to consider 2 or 3 radical ideas to deal with the threat that we face, which is really radical. It's not that radicalism is new. Radicalism is now on steroids, digital steroids. It's not that we didn't have terrorists before or extremists before or crazy people before. We do. But now they are fueled and catalyzed and aggregated and mobilized through technologies. So we have to think of a few things. One, I think before any platform, AI or non-AI or quantum or any future technology, before future technologies become commercially accessible to everyone, we have to go to what I call the vaccine principle. That first they have to be tested in a small lab, then they have to be tested on a city scale project, and then they have to be tested on a larger human settlement. Only after we are able to study the collateral implications of their entering our lives should we be giving them the permission to be available to everyone. Today, all big tech companies of the world have used us as the testing lab. And they have made a virtue out of it. Microsoft upgrade, antivirus upgrade. This is the new patch to fix the system. We are their lab. They should be paying us money for testing their product that they are earning billions of dollars on. Would you ever allow a pharmaceutical drug to tell you this? That this is your medicine, now this is your upgrade for your medicine. You would shut the company down. Because it kills a human. Technology will kill a society if you're not careful. So we have to come up with a certain sandbox arrangement where we have graded testing of the product before we allow it into human. And by the way, Singapore and UAE as well.
Yes.
So Singapore and UAE are countries, and there are some others as well. And India is considering that as well on financial technology. Sorry, I sometimes speak too fast. But India is considering that as well. So I think one is we have to come up with a radical test and verify process before technologies should be introduced into society. Then they should be tested in the communities that they want to be in. There's no point doing a test in California and creating it for the Indian market. It should be tested here. So that's the first part. The second, I think there's a very interesting episode that has shaped my life. There was a political leader in Europe, and I will not name the person, who was asked by media folks, do politicians understand technology? And I liked her reply. She said, maybe politicians don't understand technology, but do engineers understand politics? Do technologists understand politics? And I think that is equally important. I think social sciences now has to be embedded in all the coders who are being trained today. They should understand what are the implications of what they are doing. Technology is no longer about getting efficiency and economic output. It is also about serving society and protecting what we really care for and stand for. I think those who produce our technologies are very young, because that is it's a young man and woman's sport. But more important, they are not necessarily exposed to the consequences of what they are doing. I think we need far greater dose of social sciences in our innovation frameworks, in our innovation policies. In fact, all funding institutions, government and non-government, should insist that founders have to go through a certain curriculum before they produce technologies that have implication on society at scale. I think that's the second idea, that let's rethink how we train those who create technologies, and how do we support those who create technologies. But finally, it is not going to be handled by any single country or any single entity. We need global partnerships like never before. And that is what is failing our people at this time. We don't have global partnerships. Technology has become a zero sum. And between the US versus China, and Europe versus America, and West Coast versus East Coast, we are having many of these conflicts that prevents a principle-based normative framework that will in many ways come up with the 3 or 4 big laws that define innovation for the future. No, I'm a science fiction buff as a child. I used to read Isaac Asimov. I've read each book of his, and many others. But I remember Isaac Asimov had the 3 laws of robotics. Very simple. That the robot will not harm a human. Very simple law. So now there's nothing that you can do. Every program that builds an intelligent being has to be designed in a manner that they cannot harm a human. That a robot will harm itself before a harm falls on another human due to a certain. They had some 3 laws of robotics. We have to come to some we don't have to come up with legislations. All our political class loves writing long legislation. They have to come up with some 3 or 4 very simple principles that allow a reconciliation. But how does technology harm our relationship with our neighbors? Technology today can create wars. It can create unrest. It can create disturbances. It can harm international relations. It can send the wrong perception of a country to its friendly neighboring country. So these are challenges, right? But we are lucky. For example, India. If you look at India's neighborhood, we have land neighbors and we have maritime neighbors. Maritime neighbors would mean Singapore and Indonesia, would mean UAE and Saudi Arabia and some, and the Gulf countries. Land neighbors would mean Pakistan and Bangladesh. And of course China, right? We have these 3 big land neighbors and a much larger group of maritime neighbors. Some of our best relationships are with countries having distinctly different religious and cultural traditions. For example, I can without any hesitation say that the India-UAE partnership is the hottest stock on the global stock exchange. I think the last 10 years, the transformation you have seen in the political content, in the economic and business relationship, in the relationship between our cities and our peoples is huge. Yesterday I was going back to my hotel and we were celebrating the opening of IIM Ahmedabad Dubai campus. The previous month you had IIT Delhi in Abu Dhabi. You have ORF Middle East in the World Trade Center. So in some sense, our leaders are wise. Radicalism and radical groups and radical action can harm everything. Let's not be foolish and naive about it. International relations can be harmed, brotherly relationships can be harmed, friendly relationships can be harmed. We need wise leadership who looks above all this. So I think we know, for example, in the instance of UAE or India or Saudi Arabia or India, they know that yes, we may have our largest population might be Hindu, your largest population might be Muslim, but look, we are serving our people and our region. And religion is a pursuit that must be encouraged and nourished. And we do that. We celebrate our festivals. We celebrate our temples. We are not saying that you can't do this. We like to celebrate all forms of religion. And by the way, in both UAE and in India, right? We celebrate all our festivals together as communities. There's celebration of being a community, and yet national responsibilities of economic growth, of infrastructure, of progress for our people is what drives national policies, international relations. Our best friends come from very diverse backgrounds. And I've just named a few of them: Indonesia, Singapore, UAE, Saudi Arabia. You will not find a common pattern linking them up. You don't choose your neighbors. You celebrate with them.
But what do you think is the biggest misconception about the UAE-India relationship that you hope people would understand more? Because I know that I cannot see the UAE without India. They coexist hand in hand. And like we had a conversation earlier that we have many similar traits, many similar cultural morals and values.
But misconception in India or in UAE or globally?
globally, and in India and in the UAE.
Okay. So look, I don't know about misconceptions.
Okay.
So I think there are weak assessments.
Okay.
For example, like you rightly mentioned, most folks don't realize that ours is not a trading relationship. Ours is a much deeper partnership across time. We were where globalization was born. You know, the traders in this part of the world and the merchants in our part of the world were connected by the magic of monsoons. And then, of course, from here you were connected to Europe. And, you know, that's how globalization began. The IMEC, the Indo-Mediterranean, has a crucial hub, and that is called the Middle East. In some sense, that's how the first global order was built, right? So we have a civilizational affinity to each other. You know, I always say this with seriousness and as a good line, that every Emirati family has India in their history, from hospitals to schools to travels to Bollywood to holidays. They would have India in their life. And what is equally true is that every Indian family going ahead will have an Abu Dhabi or Dubai in their life. So we are connected across time through the journeys we have taken. That's the link. So that's the misunderstood.
Yeah.
We are not $100 billion relationship or a partnership for connectivity or trade. We are a partnership of hearts and minds and of histories. We are connected by hearts, minds, and histories, and we will be walking together. So I used to always joke and say that London is my favorite Indian city. That's no longer true. Dubai is the finest Indian city, and Abu Dhabi is going to be the innovation hub that will define India's future. So that's, you know, one way of looking at it. So that's not necessarily understood the depth of our relationship. The second misunderstanding is, I think people don't realize the transformation of India's participation in modern UAE. You know, from the blue collar workers in the past to those who are now sitting on the top floor of the big enterprises. There's a huge transformation. You know, roles that were typically reserved for Europeans and Americans today are now equally being, you know, in many ways offered to and are seeing the presence of Indian leadership, right? CEOs and CEOs and the C-suites in big enterprises, be it the ports and infrastructure companies, be it some of the biggest financial institutions. You see the transformation of India's role in UAE's life. I think it's not necessarily understood that India today is part of the entire spectrum of the UAE society. You know, right from the financial sector to the construction and real estate to the big factories and of course the workforce. You see India all over, and people until they get here don't realize that that is the depth of the connection, right? You have what, 50% of the population of Dubai is Indian, and maybe close to 45 or so is across UAE. It's remarkable. Even I didn't realize that. You never realize it until you see it.
Sure.
And most importantly, and people will hate me, but barring Delhi, and perhaps Bombay, there is no Indian city with better Indian food than Dubai. I know many people are going to go crazy when they hear this, but it's true. The best Indian food very soon will now be found in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and Indians, up your game. Otherwise, the best food is going to be here. I think that's something that's understood. On the other side, on just flipping the gaze, I think very few realize how important UAE is to India. It is not a state, a city-state, or a trading hub or a connectivity hub. In India's geopolitical calculus of the future, where it sees itself as a $10 trillion economy, $15 trillion economy, third largest, second largest global actor, there is no future that does not see a very strong, vibrant UAE contributing to that journey. Without UAE, our journey will not necessarily be easy. UAE will, for me, UAE is going to, in many ways, be for India that anchor that will allow India to discover itself. And I think the essentiality of UAE is sometimes not understood. People think that it's a Singapore or it's a... No. UAE has a political importance, has a social importance, and has an economic importance that is uniquely UAE.
A topic we talked about before this question was technology. And I want to ask, realistically, can India take a leap at the forefront of being a leader in tech governance, or is it going to stay independent to UAE, countries like the UAE, China, or the US?
Look, if we are partnering with UAE, that's a good scenario. So I think that is a given. Wherever we are in our technology journey, I think UAE and India are going to walk there together.
Yeah.
In one way or another, we are both going to influence each other's future technology. But coming back to the larger question, is India going to be a technology leader or a leader in offering innovative technology governance solutions? The answer is yes. Why do I say yes? I say yes because signs are there. We are the world's most sophisticated digital payments architecture. We needed to reach billions of Indians and empower them and open bank accounts and include them in our financial institutions. And we did it using technology, and we did it faster, and we do it at a scale unprecedented. We are 5 times bigger than China. There is nothing else that we are bigger than China in other than population. But now we are 5 times bigger in digital payments on a daily basis. 5 times bigger than China. So can you imagine the sophistication of our digital payment architecture that allows every individual using whatever device they want to use, sitting in whichever place in the world they are sitting in, and interact with each other at zero cost, zero friction, zero time. Literally, it's an amazing technology. That technology is not just a payments technology. That technology is also a technology where you can actually message each other. You can do many things with each other. India has built a super app by maybe by accident, but we are there. We have built a billion-plus platform which only 3 countries in the world have: the US, the Chinese, and the Indians. No one else has a platform at that scale. So India has built a platform of its own on its own technology and open source. There are, if you were to Google the word mosip.io, and I tell your audience, go to mosip, mosip.io, look at the number of people outside of India who are using this particular technology. 128 million as of last week, maybe 130 million folks are using this. India is silently changing the nature of technology offerings for the developing world. 27 countries around the world use the Indian framework for technology. So that's there are signs.
Yeah.
Now, can we compete with, say, the ChatGPT and DeepSeek on AI? Maybe not. But we will build something which will be very distinct and different, and will make it accessible to the next 7 billion. ChatGPT is for the first 300 billion. DeepSeek is for the next 1 billion. We will take AI to the next 7 billion. We will give you AI on your mobile phone and in your language and in your location with low broadband connectivity. We will give you access to AI. So that is what Innovation India is good at. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just telling you what could happen.
Yeah.
Like, for example, China built lowest cost manufacturing for solar plants. But India has the lowest solar power plants. So we take Chinese manufacturing, we innovate over it, and we do implementation innovation, and we have the lowest cost power in the world. So the point I'm trying to make here is, yes, our innovation will be to serve the next 7.5 billion. We are going to compete with the big boys in certain sectors, for example, semiconductors, for example, outer space, for example, quantum, for example, AI. We will create an Indian LLM, and we will make it both voice-based and multilingual. So we are going to change, because that's how we will cater to our populations. We are going to create those, I believe in the third mover advantage. We had the third mover advantage in telephony. We had the third mover advantage when it came to some of our connectivity and broadband based economy. And I believe in AI, we might be third, but we will do it better, faster, cheaper, and with more inclusiveness than anyone else.
I think if I had to keep the conversation going about this topic, we would take another 4 hours. But I want to drop all the topics and ask a personal question to you. What was one of your personal turning points? Was there any specific turning point that shaped who you are today? And people see the light of the end of the tunnel. Who is the light to the end of the tunnel to you? Or what was the light at the end of the tunnel for you?
when I moved away from the corporate sector, went back into college and did my studies and came back into the research segment, I think that would have been the turning point. I jokingly tell people that I was not a good engineer and I was not a good business leader as well. So, maybe I was designed to be in an academic research institution and I stumbled into this space and I've loved it ever since. So I think that 2007-8, when I gave up my corporate career and I stumbled into a think tank space which was so different, dramatically different, right? I think that would possibly be the turning point. And what would be who is the shining light or what is the shining light? I think without doubt, humans. For me, building communities has been my passion. We have, scores of youngsters who walk through the portals. I may or may not have time for many other things in my life, but there is no request from any person who wants to meet me which will not be adhered to. I will meet anyone and everyone, whether they write to me in my spam folder on Instagram or Twitter or anywhere. I will ferret it out and I will meet them. I love meeting people, investing in people, believing in people. We have at ORF people as one of our deliverables as a mission, that we invest in people. So that is one of our fundamental objectives. On a more formal basis, we have now 2,400 young fellows who have done leadership programs with us in 132 countries.
Wow.
And of course, we reach out to, ORF reaches out to 70,000 or 80,000 school-going students each year in different languages on different projects. In India, numbers should not excite you because it's endless. It's an endless landscape. But we do that work.
Yeah.
So I think light at the end of the day are these smart, bright, young people who now sometimes call me and say that, can we work with you in a project, and they want to support ORF. I love that. They came through ORF, they are leading big institutions, they are wanting to find new partnerships. I think people, light at the end of the tunnel is people. Community is the cavalry. Community is also the salvation. For me, I bet on communities.
Throughout our conversation, you talked about reading books when you were young, and I'm sure you still read books today, and you're an author also of 5 different books. So I want to end the conversation today with one last question. What is a book recommendation you would give to youngsters today?
In the turbulent times that we live in, I want them to read one book because it will confirm to them that times have always been turbulent. There's nothing so special about this moment. Human beings have always lived through great transitions. And I think for that, the book they should read is Gun, Germs and Steel by Jared Diamond. It's a book they should not miss. In fact, my book Geotechnography is a homage to him. I think that book is excellent. Please read it. But with all the disorder around us, I would also advise him to read Samuel Huntington, but not The Clash of Civilizations, but his other work. I think it's called Political Order in Changing Societies, 1968, if I remember. I'm forgetting the exact title. But Samuel Huntington, 1968, Political Order in Changing Societies, and will tell you, what it basically tells you is that if the rate of change, social, political, economic, is too fast, institutions collapse and societies tear up. And in that sense, all those who demand dramatic changes all the time are basically asking for the collapse of what we built up. And therefore, I always tell youngsters that I watch movies of revolutionaries, but I invest in being an evolutionary. I like evolutions, fast evolutions. And I love revolutions in movies. And that's where I am.
Honestly, I really enjoyed today's conversation. And I want to thank you again for being in another episode of Trending Echoes, Dr. Sami Saran.
Thank you, Yaz.
Thank
you
you
for
so
having me.
much.
Nous avons le plaisir aujourd'hui d'accueillir à Trends Madame Shannon Seban, membre du conseil municipal de Rosny-sous-Bois et présidente du parti de la Renaissance en Seine-Saint-Denis et militante
Welcome to the new season of Trending Echoes. My name is Liazi Al-Hosseini and I'll be your host today with a very special guest, Mina Al-Arabi, Editor-in-Chief of The National. Hey, Mina.
Hi, Azia. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very happy to be with you.
I want to start off this conversation today with a very simple question. Who is Mina Al-Arabi when nobody's around?
Wow, that's a good question. I think first and foremost, I'm the daughter of Abdul Muhim Al-Arabi and some.
Welcome to another episode of Trending Echoes. And I'm delighted to be your host today. We have a very special guest with us, His Excellency Sir Liam Fox, the former Secretary of Defense of the UK, and now the chairman of the Abraham Accords Prosperity Group. It's very nice to have you here with us.
It's a pleasure to be back.
I want to start off today's conversation with a simple question. Who is Sir Liam Fox when nobody's around?
Unshaven, because I hate shaving almost as much as I hate wearing ties, and with music on. So wherever I am, if I'm at home, if I'm in a hotel, wherever I am, and I'm not on parade, that's what it will be like.
So you grew up in a council house in East Kilbride before becoming a doctor and then pursuing your career in politics. How did that shape who you are today?
Well, the common factor, I suppose, in all of that was the type of household I grew up in. We didn't have very much money, but my parents were very focused on education. And so for Christmas and birthdays, we would tend to get books rather than anything else. And I was always a very avid reader as a child. And one day, someone gave me a book about science, a big, lots of pictures for a 10-year-old, I think a 8-year-old I might have been at the time. And that's where I got my fascination with all things scientific and medical. And it grew from there. But my parents always very much encouraged us to, my father was a teacher. He taught French and Spanish, which I used to speak not badly, but now it's dreadful. It's embarrassing. But the household was always very focused on, if you learn, this is the way you get opportunity. So I suppose all those different things had resonances. My parents were quite interested in politics. They didn't have the same political views, but they encouraged us always to take an interest in current affairs, and I suppose all those different influences just added up over the years.
Growing up in a household that is very much interlinked with politics, is that the reason why you dropped medicine? And so what drove that decision to drop medicine and to pursue politics?
I never took a decision to drop medicine, as it were. I was interested in politics. I was interested at university. I was involved in politics then. When I became a doctor, I worked in the health service in Britain for 9 years before I went into politics. And for a time, I would go down on my afternoon off from my medical surgery to go down and do some speech writing for Margaret Thatcher when she was Prime Minister. And then the seat that I ultimately was elected for was becoming vacant because the MP was standing down, and they said, why don't you stand for that? And so I kind of went into politics earlier than I might have anticipated. And I always thought that if I don't like politics, I can go back to medicine. But, 32 years later, I was still there. It's people will say, the implication is often, why did you study for medicine? Why did you get all that experience and then go into public life? I think actually public life benefits from people coming from a much wider range of backgrounds. And medicine gives you a particular, I think, advantage in politics in that it teaches you a sense of proportion. So somebody who's having a cardiac arrest feels like a crisis. Somebody who writes something in a diary column in a newspaper that you don't like is an irritation. It's not a crisis. And a lot of people in politics don't really tell the difference between the two. So I think that medicine does give you a sense of perspective. But also, because of the nature of it, means that you understand people's problems. You have to, to be a doctor, you have to understand the patient's backgrounds and, their social factors as well as everything else. And you do develop a picture of what the country's like that you live in. And I often think that people who go into politics who've not done jobs outside politics are at a major disadvantage. And, if you want to govern a country, maybe you ought to know something about it before you do.
True. Okay, so 32 years, so over 3 decades in the parliament. Very simple. What do you think was your biggest achievement, but what was also your biggest regret?
So, in the big picture, Brexit, leaving the European Union, which I had wanted to do for a long time. But more personally, I passed the legislation in Britain for people with Down syndrome to give them more rights in education and health and social care. Because I think that how you treat the most vulnerable people in your society is a measure of how civilized your society is. What do I regret? Well, a lot of things, usually not speaking out when I thought I should have. And in the latter years in particular, I thought that the government was taking the wrong trend in its economic policy in particular. I remain an unreconstructed Thatcherite on the economy. And I thought that its immigration policies were too liberal. I think that we still have some way to go on that. And I'll be speaking in the UK in the not too distant future, setting out how I still think we need to redress that balance, because I think the new British government is taking those wrong trends even further in the wrong direction.
So many people say that Brexit harmed Britain's economy, especially when it comes to the younger people. Do you agree with the fact that Brexit is or was seen as the generational mistake?
Quite the opposite. So for me, Brexit was a constitutional issue. And it was about Britain being able to make its own laws without being interfered with by any outside power. To give you an example that maybe those who are watching will understand, I was asked the question on Bloomberg TV one time, why explain to an American audience why you want Brexit. I said, well, if in America there was a court in Mexico City or in Ottawa that could overrule the American Supreme Court and there was nothing that Congress could do about it, you wouldn't like that. And they said to me, but we would never have allowed that to happen. I said, exactly. And for me, this was about Britain being able to take control of its own sovereignty. Now, of course, that has its pluses and minuses. It means that governments can make mistakes, governments can make greater achievements. Brexit simply said to the governments of the United Kingdom, you have more freedom to do what you want. Now, that's up to the people of Britain to decide which government they choose to put in that position. The arguments about trade, I don't hold up at all, because the majority of Britain's trade is outside the European Union anyway, and was always growing outside the European Union, including, it has to be said, with countries like the UAE, where the trade was becoming much greater. And Europe as a share of global trade is shrinking. So it made much more sense for Britain to give itself more freedom to trade with the growing bit of the global economy than the shrinking bit of the global economy. Now, whether Britain chooses to actually do that and take advantage of that freedom is up to the government of the day.
But what's your idea on, okay, so do you see cracks in the idea of global Britain? Or do you think, because you said that that Britain is stronger even outside of the EU, but do you think there is cracks when it comes to the idea of Great Britain?
No, but
not Great Britain, global Britain, sorry.
No, but I do think that in the world at the moment, we're moving back from a commitment to a very integrated global economy with the rise of more nationalist or protectionist thought. I actually believe that the application of free markets and free trade is the way in which we've taken 1 billion people out of abject poverty in the world. And without becoming too technical about it, if you believe in the concepts of comparative advantage in trade, of course, you're going to have to continually adapt and to say, we want the benefits of global free trade, but we don't want the disbenefits in terms of what it may do to competitiveness in our own economies. You can't have it both ways. So you have to make the adjustments. And I think that if you try to apply protectionism,
Check, check. 1, 2. Check, check. Mic check. Hello. Bismillah. Salam alaikum. Check 1, 2. Check, check, check. Okay.
it will fail. And in any country that says, how much of a tariff do I have to apply to a German BMW to stop my own population buying them? It's the wrong question. The right question is, why are they not buying cars produced in my own country? And so I think that the global economy is so integrated in the real economy that if politicians try to disaggregate it, they will come up with big problems. And I think there's a second one, which is, if by doing so you make it more difficult for poor countries to trade their way out of poverty, you're much more likely to trigger a wave of mass migration, because people can see what prosperity looks like on their mobile phone. And if you deny it to them through legitimate means, they're much more likely to get on a boat or get on the road. And I think that for policymakers in the West, there is often a dislocation between